Hi, everyone. Let's talk about the rise of cities. Okay, first, some of you are reading this stuff in the book. So, this is chapter 9. I'm doing sections 2, 3, and 4 in this one lecture. And don't worry, it's not going to be a crazy long lecture. I've already talked a lot about a lot of stuff in these sections in the past. And this chapter 9 is kind of like hitting home, really making sure you understand a lot of this stuff. But I feel like I've done a pretty good job of it already. So I've just condensed all of those sections into one lecture. But for those of you that do go back and read after I lecture, which is a really, really good idea, this is chapter 9, sections 2, 3, and 4. So the rise of cities. How did it happen? How come there were more people? Well, let's talk about germs. You all know what germs are, right? I'm sure you know what germs are because there's a pandemic going on right now. Why are we all wearing masks? We're wearing masks so our germs don't get everywhere. But in the early 1800s, not everybody knew that. There were some doctors and scientists that knew about germs, but when they talked to people about them, they were laughed at. That fool believes there are teeny tiny little things that carry disease. Fool, everybody knows that you get diseases because God is mad at you. But then in 1870, this guy, Louis Pasteur, proved that germs are real. Germ theory. And once he proved that germs were real and germs really did make disease, suddenly doctors and scientists started going, oh, yeah, totally. We believed it the whole time. We believed in germs, and people started doing things like washing their hands more often. And this really made people live longer. It made less people die. And what else happened? Louis Pasteur made some vaccines. Let's see. Yes. Also, Florence Nightingale. These two names also, Louis Pasteur, this is not the last time you will hear his name. You'll hear his name in probably every science class you ever take for the rest of your life, and especially in biology, because it's a really big deal. He proved that germs were real. That's big. Okay, so back to Florence Nightingale. She's another name. There are like movies made about this lady. Back then, we're talking beginning of the Industrial Revolution, hospitals were scary freaking places. They were so dirty and gross, and they smelled bad. And hospitals were known as places that poor people went to die. If you were so sick or hurt or injured that you had to go to the hospital, you were probably going to die. And rich people insisted that doctors come to their house. Rich people weren't going to go to a hospital. They were gross. Well, this lady, Florence Nightingale, was a nurse, and she is the one that said that hospitals should be places that help people, not hurt people. And the number one rule of doctors should be to not hurt their patient. And she also said that hospitals should be clean. And she headed up this like force of people all over England that started saying, let's clean the hospitals, let's make the hospitals cleaner. People shouldn't go to hospitals to die. People should go to hospitals to get help. So Florence Nightingale, big name in the medical world. So cities are getting bigger because we've got a healthier population. Another is urban renewal. What this means is renew. To renew means to make young again, to refresh. And we've talked about what cities were like before. They're kind of nasty and gross. And now they're making the cities cleaner and better, and they're making the roads look really nice. They're putting in sidewalks. They're putting in sewers. You guys don't really think about sewer lines. I'm just going to write that because I know not all of you are English first languages. This is how you spell sewer. Your sewer is where your pee and your poop go when you flush the toilet. And you don't ever really think about that, do you? You've sat down on the toilet and you just took a poop, and now you've wiped your butt and you've flushed the toilet, and you don't ever think about that poop again, do you? You don't ever, I don't think any one of you ever think to yourself, I wonder where my poop has gone. It's just, we just use the toilet, we flush it, we go on. But in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, they didn't have that kind of stuff. Lots of people just pooped in a bucket in their room and then threw the bucket out the window. But if you were of the middle class, you probably had running water inside your house, which means you might have a toilet. And they didn't have flush for the toilet or push buttons. They had a string they pulled that flushed the toilet. But you pull the string, you flush the toilet, and lots of times the water, it just went straight outside onto the street. So they didn't have to worry about it anymore. It was gone. It wasn't in their house. They didn't have to dump out a nasty bucket, but it just went right onto the streets. Well, sewers, the sewer in your house is the pipe that carries your pee and poop away from your house and off somewhere else. And those became, they were put in the cities, were sewer lines. So we had streets, we had sidewalks, we had sewers, we had steel. Don't forget that you had steel so they could build big, tall buildings. So cities were becoming not just nasty factories putting coal out in the air and making everybody sick, but some people were beginning to enjoy living in the cities. Another reason that cities were getting pretty awesome was labor unions started mutual aid societies. Mutual aid societies. There's a space right there. These are two words, mutual aid. I didn't really put enough space in there. But anyway, labor unions started mutual aid societies. And the way this works is, here's person number 1 and person number 2, person number 3, person number 4, and person number 5. But instead of 5, there are really 500 of them. So like this guy represents 100 people. This guy no, sorry, you know what? It probably wasn't 100. I bet it was 10. This person represents 10, 10, 10, 10, and 10. And these guys all got together and said, let's start a fund. Like, let's start a bank account kind of thing. Let's start a fund to save money. So if one of our members gets sick or injured, we can help that person out. So, like 10 people every month, these 10 people give $100. Or no, probably not $100, probably $10. So this is, we get $100 a month from these 10 people, and $100 a month from these 10, and $100 a month from these 10, and 100 from these 10, and 100 from these 10. So now we've got $500 a month. And one person from this group gets his arm caught in a machine and loses his arm. Let's see if I can erase. No, I'm gonna have to make him lose a leg. There we go. This guy loses a leg. He can't work anymore. But all of his labor union partners, all of his labor union buddies have been giving money to this account every month. And now he gets to live off that money. He has money to feed his children. He has money to pay his rent. He lost a leg. He's got to see a doctor. He has money to pay to see the doctor. All because his labor union partners set up a mutual aid society. Like, hey guys, join this club and we'll help you if you get hurt or you get sick. And it was a really good idea. And this is where the beginnings of governments starting to do this for their people came from. It was labor unions that did it first. I've told you all that, I'm sorry, I don't know if this is in Kazakhstan or not, but in the United States, if this were to happen, if this guy's at his factory job and he gets hurt on the job and loses his leg, now the US government will give him a check every month to help him feed his children, pay his rent, all that stuff. But the government didn't do that before. It was labor unions that set up mutual aid societies to help their members. But remember that labor unions had lots of power. Labor unions had lots of power over their bosses. Oh, not power of, sorry. Power over bosses. Because if the boss didn't give in to their demands, they would have a strike. And all the workers would walk out, or all the union members would walk out. And when all the union members walked out, they couldn't run the factory, and then the boss was screwed. So the bosses did not like labor unions at all. So bosses would sometimes, well, not sometimes, oftentimes, a lot, would hire people to beat up union leaders. They'd even kill them. They would beat up, they would kill labor union leaders trying to discourage unions. When a company would go on strike, when a union would go on strike, bosses oftentimes would hire thugs. They would hire thugs to go out and beat up all the strikers. They would take like iron pipes and just beat people down and tell them either go back to work right now or you're fired. Get out. It was a pretty rough time. But finally, the government finally said that people had a legal right to join unions. And once the government said they had a legal right to join unions, then if the boss hired someone to beat somebody up just because they were striking, suddenly the boss is in trouble. All right. Also, we had the cult of domesticity. This is a T. So domestic. Do you guys know what domestic means? Kind of looks like the Russian dom is what? Home, right? I know a little Russian, I'm learning. Okay, so the cult of domesticity is the cult of domesticness, the cult of women staying home. So let's talk about before a middle class existed. Before the middle class existed, there were the super rich, and there was everybody else that had nothing. The super rich, those women didn't really have any responsibilities. I mean, they had babies, but other people raised their children for them. They had a home, but they wouldn't even know how to sew a dress or wash a dish. They couldn't, because they paid people to do all that stuff for them. And the women of the really rich class, all they really did was hang out with their friends all the time. Like, life was a party. And then there was everybody else that was really poor. And if you were 5 years old, you were old enough to work. The man worked, the woman worked, all the children worked. These people, when they had a baby in their house and both the husband and the wife had to work, they literally left their baby in a box. In a box. They left their baby in a box for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, because who were they going to pay to take care of a baby? They just couldn't. So there was the rich and the poor. But now, during the Industrial Revolution, you've got this middle class coming up. And the middle class, we talked about this already, the middle class had enough money that the man had his job and the woman could stay home. It was a real luxury. Like, she could stay home. They didn't have to leave their baby in a box. She could wash the dishes. She could kind of tidy up the house and clean it. They didn't have as much money as the really rich people did, but she didn't have to work a 16-hour shift and then come home and cook and clean and take care of the kids. She could do all that stuff during the day while her husband was at work. But this whole cult came along. It's really bothering me that I messed up on that. Domesticity. This whole cult, that's almost a religion, formed around women being at home. And this whole thing, all of society changed to believe that women belonged inside the home. And you had really made it in life. As a family, you had financially succeeded if the wife didn't have to work. If she could stay home and cook and clean and take care of the kids, that's where a woman just belonged. But it turned into people would kind of snub their noses and think that if a woman actually had to work, well, I'm better than her. I don't have to work. And this whole kind of, just society really changed. It changed from the man and the woman both worked to in the middle, and that was perfectly normal. The man and the woman both worked. It had been that way since the beginning of time. You've all heard of hunter-gatherers. Since the dawn of time, since humans existed, men and women have both worked. And now it's changed to where only the man works a job outside of the home. I'm not saying that cooking and cleaning and taking care of babies is not working. That is really hard work. But it turned into people expected the woman to stay home all the time. And if you were a woman and you had to work because you guys needed the money, then people in the middle class looked down on you. They thought they were better than you. So during this time, because women suddenly had lots of free time that they had never had before, lots of women started groups, clubs together. Some women got together and decided that slavery was bad. Slavery bad. And the people that thought that slavery was bad and that we should end slavery, the movement to end slavery is called abolition. Oh man, you guys are gonna think I'm a terrible no, goodness, sorry, it's late. I was at the vet with my cat again. Abolition. The movement to end slavery is abolition. A person that supports abolition is an abolitionist. An abolitionist. There was also, so women they've got a whole lot of time to hang out now and meet each other and make friends. You know, when you're working 16 hours a day, you don't have much time to make friends. Your whole life is just work. But now women find themselves being able to talk to each other and make friends. And women realized that they should be able to vote. Women should be able to vote. And that movement is called the suffrage movement. Suffrage. So abolition is to end slavery. Suffrage is for women to be able to vote. And there was one more movement that was pretty big during the industrial revolution, was temperance. And the temperance movement was to make alcohol illegal. So here you are. You are a poor person that works 16 hours a day, 6 days a week in a mine. You are so exhausted all the time. Your whole family is exhausted. All your kids are working all the time. Your life is miserable. You can barely afford just to get food. And sometimes you just spend a little extra money on some alcohol. Well, we all probably know what happens when you drink alcohol. You've probably all seen a very loud, rowdy group that's all drunk, like probably, I don't know, like 25-year-old guys that are all drunk and they're obnoxious and nobody wants to be anywhere near them. Well, a whole bunch of ladies decided that alcohol was bad and we should have temperance. Now, it's not really the alcohol that's bad. It's people's horrible living situations that drive them to drinking, because drinking helps you forget how bad things are. So they're living in a really, really bad situation and they're drinking to help forget that. But the temperance movement was all about, no, it's the alcohol that's bad. So we had three big movements: the abolition movement, the suffrage movement, and the temperance movement. And there were men. There were some men that supported a woman's right to vote. There were some men that thought alcohol should be illegal. And there were some men that thought slavery was bad. But these groups were mostly women. All right, now, the 3 R's. Let me capital. The 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. So, schools, public schools became big. People thought that, so now that there are factories, the bosses at the factories realized that they really needed their employees to know how to read, at least a little bit. And so public schools began. And public schools began to teach basic reading, not anything fancy, just basic reading, basic writing, and basic math. Arithmetic. Basic math, like 2 + 2 is 4. 8 + 8 is 16. Not anything fancy. Arithmetic is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. And they called it the 3 R's. And higher class, smart, like intelligent people, they thought this was really funny because, you know, writing doesn't begin with R. And this isn't arithmetic, it's arithmetic. But you know how sometimes when you're trying to pronounce a word in a language that you don't understand, you might pronounce it incorrectly? Well, you've got an entire society of people that can't read or write. And so instead of saying arithmetic, they just call it arithmetic. So the people that were uneducated, they called it the 3 R's because they heard reading, writing, arithmetic. And then the educated people, they thought it was funny. And they were like, oh yeah, the 3 R's. Yeah. Let's teach the 3 R's in school. So public schools came along. But as we got an educated class, people started wanting more education. And that's when secondary school began. Secondary schools were only for boys. Sorry, ladies, only for boys. And then once lots of people, or not lots, but enough people started going to secondary school, they wanted even more education. And so colleges and universities began popping up, like universities started becoming more and more common. Also only for boys. Until the 1840s. Yeah, I'm making sure that I'm right. Yes, in the 1840s, women started being allowed in high schools and colleges and universities. Let's see. John Dalton. You'll learn about this guy in science class. John Dalton came up with the atomic theory. And that is the model of the atom. I'm sure you've all seen the model of an atom. You've got neutrons and you've got protons. And then out here, this is the nucleus, right? This is the nucleus of an atom. Out here, you've got the electrons floating around. Well, the guy that discovered this, that actually looked inside an atom for the first time and came up with this design, was John Dalton. People also started talking about science. They were already, this is the science section. That's what I meant to say. Science. John Dalton. People also started arguing the age of the Earth. And this was big because remember, most people couldn't read and write. And also religion had become really big again, right? In Western Europe and the United States, religion was big. And the Bible, Christian religion, The Bible says that the earth is 6,000 years old. And people that can't read and write anyway, and they just have their preachers telling them this stuff, and they believe it because they're a preacher, or even if they don't go to church, people couldn't really imagine how old the earth was. And scientists started telling them it's billions and billions of years old. And people are like, no, I don't believe you. But they started coming up with scientific reasons to prove it. And then we've got Charles Darwin, who came up with, what did Charles Darwin write about in his book called The Origin of Species? I hope someone is yelling at their computer right now. Charles Darwin said evolution. And evolution was mind-blowing, and people did not like it. People even in the science community laughed at him. Some people believed him, some people laughed at him, but the everyday, just normal, everyday, uneducated person, they were all disgusted by the idea of evolution. I wish I could give you an hour-long lecture on evolution right now because I love the topic, but I really can't. If you are listening to this right now and you would like me to give you a lecture and explain to you how evolution works, just ask and I will make an extra video and I will send you the link and you can watch it whenever you want because I love the topic of evolution, but we don't have time to do it in class. Then this thing called social evolution came along. Oh, sorry, no, not social evolution, social Darwinism. So evolution teaches survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest. That means survival of the best. If you are only the strongest and the healthiest survive. Well, people took Darwin's ideas and they used them in a social way. Now, Darwin himself was purely science, but people took his ideas and made them very, very racist. People said that socially, only the strong survive. And when they said only the strong survive, or the strong get better, they were saying that the reason that Western Europeans, people that looked like me, white people, they were saying that the reason that we are so developed and places like India and Africa and Kazakhstan are so far behind is because we are a better race. We are stronger and smarter and better, and that's why we're so advanced and they're so backwards. Now, I know, and hopefully any of you in this class know that that's not true. Like, I'm American, and the reason that I'm American and I have a laptop to record this on and a cell phone while some poor person is working a farm in Africa, it's not because I'm white. That's not why. I'm teaching you, you're all learning why. It has nothing to do with the color of skin. But You get a bunch of racist pricks together, and they're going to tell you that my race is the dominant race because we are the fittest and the best. And that is social Darwinism. None of it is true. It's all crap. But it became a thing and people believed it. And people still today in 2020, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry to have to say this out loud, but people still believe this stuff. You'll still hear about social Darwinism. You can Google that stuff. You go on Reddit and you will see some nasty, awful, horrible excuses for human beings saying that my race is the superior race. I'm sorry that people like that exist in the world, but they do. All right, we're almost finished. We're going to talk about the arts. Okay, first we have to go to the Enlightenment. Go back to the Enlightenment. Everything was very scientific. Very scientific. They had perfectly drawn straight lines in art, and everything was very, very exact. Well, now we're going with romance, the Romantic period. When you hear this in music or art or literature for the rest of your life, I want you to know, and I want you to be able to correct people. This is not talking, the Romantic period is not about love. It's not, oh, I love him so much. It's so romantic. That's not what this is. What this means is imagination, emotion, whether it's anger or sadness or happy or love, any kind of emotion, and freedom. Like artists were just free to express whatever they wanted, and they didn't have to paint a picture of this glass with water in it. They were free to imagine something. They could imagine a ship on the ocean and paint a picture of it. And everything was just very, I don't know, imagination and emotion filled. And that's in painting. In music, Romantic music time period is all about evoking emotion. You'll listen to music from this time period and it should make you feel an emotion. It might make you kind of tap your foot and happy. It might make you cry. Lots of music from this time period is very, very, very sad sounding. Like it's music you think you'd hear at a funeral. Why is this so sad? And they were doing it on purpose. They were trying to evoke emotion in you. Okay, that's music and painting and authors, writers, poets, books, whatever, from the Romantic time. Their stories were usually cute and they had happy endings, and lots of them talked about fables and folk tales. They would go back to legends from centuries before and write them into modern day type books. A famous Romantic author is Lord Byron. And he's famous for saying, my joys my grief, my passions, and my powers made me a stranger. What in the world does that mean? Have you ever met someone, or maybe you are that someone, and your personality just doesn't necessarily fit with the people around you? Like, you have trouble making friends because there's nothing wrong with you. You're just a little different from all your classmates. Maybe you laugh more than they laugh, or you cry more than they cry, or you daydream more than they daydream. And it's just like you have a hard time kind of fitting in, or you know someone that is that person. Well, Lord Byron was that person. He thought that everyone was very serious all the time, and no one ever really expressed their emotions. And Lord Byron did. Wow. When he was happy, he was really happy. And when he was sad, he was really sad. And when he liked something, he really liked it. And it was just too much for people, and he couldn't make friends. And so he's saying that made him a stranger, even among people. He could be in a whole room full of people and still feel lonely because other people didn't really get him. Other people didn't get him. He had a hard time getting along. But this phrase right here just totally embodies how much romanticism was different. Romanticism was different from the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was all very scientific and serious. And Romanticism was all about enjoying, feeling everything. Really feel your pain. Really feel your sadness. Really feel your happiness. Feel your joy. Feel your love. Romanticism was all about that. Last page. Romanticism was about 1800 to 1850. Starting in 1850, we moved into realism. Realism with painting and writing. So things started turning really dark. Romanticism was all about feeling everything, and it had a very positive lean to it. Everything was happy and beautiful. And then everything swung back the other way, and artists and writers started saying, I'm going to paint about reality. Reality is not beautiful women sitting in the park having picnics. Reality is a poor guy struggling, working in a factory to feed his children. Reality is, Victor Hugo wrote a book called Les Miserables, and this book is all about a man that was so broke and desperate and starving that he stole a loaf of bread. One loaf of bread just to eat because he was literally starving. He stole a loaf of bread and he was sent to prison. And it's all about his, like, he ended up serving years in prison for stealing a loaf of bread. That is the harsh reality of life. And writings and paintings turn very real. But then everything swung back again because the camera was invented. That you could actually take pictures of real things and get a real photo. So what were artists any good for anymore? Why would painters paint something that was real if you could just take a picture? So painters started going the opposite way, and Impressionism came about. The most famous Impressionist artist is Monet. I would like you to look up this artist. His name's Claude Monet. I'd like you to look him up and just do like a Google image search of Claude Monet's paintings and pick one that you like and take a screenshot or send me the link. I'm doing this right now for the same reason I did something in the last lecture. I want to make sure people are actually listening to this. So just look up Claude Monet and find one of his paintings that you like, because then you'll also see what Impressionism is. Impressionism is not real at all. I mean, unless you have problems with your vision, because it's kind of blurry and fuzzy. And they did that on purpose because they were trying to do art that wasn't very, very real, because now you could use a camera to catch something that was real. And then after Impressionism, there was a new era called Post-Impressionism. And a famous artist from Post-Impressionism is Vincent van Gogh. I bet you have all seen his painting called The Scream. There's a guy standing on a bridge going, that's The Scream. That's Vincent van Gogh. And in Post-Impressionism, the paintings look very simplistic. I mean, you've all seen my art. It almost looks like I could do it. They're simplistic, but they evoke emotion. Like when you look at a Post-Impressionism time period painting, it should look like maybe even a child could have done it. But their use of color and their use of texture makes you feel something emotional when you look at it. That's Post-Impressionism. And we're all finished. I hope you all enjoyed it. Really, I'm so serious. If you want my lecture on evolution, I will do it for you. All you have to do is ask, and everyone doesn't have to watch it. I'll make one and I'll just send it to anybody that's interested. All right, I'm out.